Welcome back once again to Meditation for All. This time we have lined up for you a new set of 10 programs which has been dubbed Buddhist Concepts. In fact, it's a follow-on from much of the content which we have already looked at on this program. The first 10 lessons which we studied together was called Meditation for Beginners, and most of that course dealt with the skills and the actual practice of meditation in our daily lives. After that, we followed on with a second set, which was called Meditation and Life, which was more to do with the everyday life and many of the features of life which can either help or hinder our practice of meditation. But I'm sure there are many viewers amongst you, especially those who have been watching some of the other broadcasts here on the DMC channel, who are wondering whether there is actually more to it than just meditation, and perhaps more interested to look at some of the other aspects of Buddhist culture, but perhaps have not been able to make so much sense of this as you would like. So over the next 10 weeks, we're taking the opportunity to go in a very simple and sequential way through some of the most important Buddhist concepts, especially concerning the law of karma, and hopefully this sort of context will be able to help you to make your way through the other content which you find on the DMC channel in a more informed way. Many people who are interested in meditation suddenly feel very shocked when they come to the idea of accepting or embracing ideas which belong to Buddhism. But perhaps to help those of you who feel some reluctance in this respect, I'd like to say that Buddhism is not something which is exclusive. It's not something which is setting itself up as a competitor to other sorts of religious belief. But in fact, it is a label which we apply to anything which helps us towards the experience of enlightenment. Because the word Buddha itself actually means enlightened or happy or joyous. And anything which you think which you are doing to help you towards these qualities, in fact, you could say it is part of Buddhist culture or part of Buddhist concepts. There are many features of Buddhism which sometimes lead people to say that Buddhism is not actually a religion at all. Some people go as far to say that Buddhism is just a philosophy, others say it is a lifestyle. But I think as a rule of thumb, it's safe to say that there are some aspects of Buddhism which require some steps of faith. It's not that you can take everything on board on face value. It's not that everything in Buddhism can be explained just in terms of material phenomena. So I'm not going to pretend that Buddhism is nothing more than humanism. But as regards taking steps of faith, I'd like to reassure viewers that taking steps of faith is nothing so scary as it might seem. In fact, in our daily lives, we take steps of faith the whole of the time. But sometimes we like to refer to them instead as educated guesses. Sometimes we like to call them benefit of the doubt. But in fact, every time we get up in the morning, we have to go through our lives with beliefs or expectations about the world. Even getting out of our bed and standing on the floor, we have the expectation that the floor is not going to give away under our feet or bring any sort of harm to us. So it's normal for people to go through their lives with some degree of expectations. But if we are sensible people, if we're not gullible people, then the expectations we have are based on information, they are based on experience. And in fact, most of what we're going to be looking at in terms of Buddhist concepts are things which have been arrived at as a result of information, as a result of practice. And if you wish to verify them for yourself, then you can also re-verify them, although it may take a long time to do so, but all of the truths which we find, all of the things which we find mentioned in these programs, you can in fact verify for yourself by your own experience, especially through your meditation. But what I'd like to say is that Buddhism is more than just a philosophy, it's more than just a lifestyle. There are some educated guesses involved, but these educated guesses can be made on the basis of your practice. And they are not exclusive things which mean that you have to give up any other sorts of conclusions or expectations which you've had about the world. In fact, they're complementary to many other good things which you've learned about your life. So with this proviso that there are some things in the course which maybe you have to take and think about for a bit, not just to accept on face value, then we will start to work through our course little by little, and hopefully by the end of these 10 sessions you'll be able to have a lot more idea about some of the connections in life which we normally fail to see. Normally when we talk about connections in life, we think that anything which is not physically connected cannot have an effect on something else. But what we do in Buddhism, and why I've started by saying that we do need to explore a little deeper and accept some things perhaps on the benefit of the doubt in the beginning, is that because in Buddhism we do make connections which sometimes in other areas of knowledge or science fail to be made. For example, in Buddhism we talk about levels of connection on 3 different levels. The first level of description, which we've talked about mostly up till now, is the level of description of the mind. If we talk about the mind itself, this sphere of brightness which we have here in our center, which I'm sure many of you have discovered more and more now as a result of your meditation, is that the sort of hindrances which get in the way of the brightness in the mind are things which we call impurities or defilements. The things like the greed, the hatred, and the delusion in our minds, which on a very small scale, the micro scale in our lives, can have effects which have much bigger implications in our life. Because of greed or hatred in our lives, we can find that our lifestyle is affected so that we fail to get happiness in life. So the level of the mind is the first level of description which I'd like to talk to you about. The second level of description which I'd like to talk about, which is also very much present in our Buddhist concepts, is the level of our lifestyle. Just as lifestyle can be something which is going well or has a lot of obstacles in it, and we also find that our mind can have either good or bad days. Just as lifestyle can go well or badly, then we have to look for the reasons why sometimes our life can have areas in it which we find as hindrances. In terms of Buddhist culture or Buddhist concepts, we would call the black spots in our lifestyle our various forms of behaviors which we might call unwholesome behaviors. So whenever such unwholesome behaviors crop up in our life or in our midst in society, then it shows that somehow our lifestyle is being affected for the worse. So just as the mind, which is naturally in good condition, can be affected by defilements such as greed, hatred or delusion to have a lesser quality, then our lifestyle can be affected to have a lesser quality by the various sorts of behaviors in our life which would be considered unwholesome. On the third level of description, I'd like to talk about the world in terms of the environment. The environment's actually very topical these days, and often we address the environment as if it were in complete isolation from any other factors in our lives. What we see is that normally our world is in good shape. We have green trees, we have unpolluted lakes, nice atmosphere, clear skies. All of these are things which we associate with an environment which is natural and unpolluted. But within that, usually once we have more and more of our industrial activities going on, we find that even the natural environment can have its black spots in terms of pollution, which may detract from the natural beauty of the environment and even eventually come back to us in terms of lack of clean drinking water or natural disasters in terms of floods or storms. So we have 3 different levels of description. We have the level of the mind, we have the level of our lifestyle, and we also have the level of the environment. If we take these 3 in isolation, we might think that there's nothing to connect the 3. And this is why many people who are working as environmentalists seem to believe that it's by helping the environment that the environment can become better. But in Buddhism we make a connection between the 3. connection which perhaps is not made elsewhere. And we say that the reason why our environment is suffering, the reason why our environment has pollution, is because the people living in the environment have lifestyles which have unwholesome behaviors in them. The reason why people have lifestyles with unwholesome behaviors is because their minds are polluted by defilements. So on all three levels we find a parallel between the natural pure state of the mind, lifestyle or the environment, and the pollution by the unnatural aspects which come into our lives, whether it be defilements on the level of the mind, whether it be unwholesome behaviors on the level of our lifestyle, or whether it be pollution on the level of the environment. And we'd say that even on the level of the environment, things always come back to individual behaviors, individual quality of mind. And this is why in Buddhism, although we appreciate and we rejoice that so many people are interested in the environment these days, what we find is that at its roots, the real cause for environmental destruction, in fact, is coming from the attitudes in people's minds. It's because of their greed that we are overloading the environment. It's because of their carelessness that they are throwing litter. It's because of their lack of responsibility that they are polluting water sources instead of thinking of the generations to come. So in Buddhism, our attitude is always to come back to individual people and individual quality of mind. So even though we may be dealing with very broad concepts such as the environment or lifestyle of people throughout the world, but we never escape the factor of our mind and what we can do to purify our mind. So over the next few weeks we're going to be looking at a little bit further, making a few more connections which perhaps will become easier for you to see as time goes on. Today I've taken a long shot and made a connection between three levels of description in the world. But in fact there are much more levels of description than this which I'd like to talk about. Especially the aspects of coincidence are things which are not often talked about in serious or scientific circles. But in Buddhism we talk about management of coincidence so that we can manage the coincidences that happen in our life so that we end up with more positive coincidences happening than negative ones. It may sound like also a fairy story, but we'll see how we can do this within the context of what we call the law of karma. It's not something which is completely beyond the pale, but it's something which, if you open up your heart and you can gradually allow some of these concepts to seep in to your awareness and attitudes, before long you'll find that in fact they do start to make some sense, and they do start to be able to explain many things which otherwise it's very hard to explain purely in mechanical ways. So for this first episode of the Meditation for All Buddhist Concepts sub-series, I'd like to say welcome to the course, and I'd like to say that next time on this show we will be looking a little bit further in our Buddhist concepts at what we actually mean by origins in the Buddhist sense. In Buddhism we also have the idea of Genesis, and in fact the Genesis legend in Buddhism explains a lot about how we saw things in the beginning and help us to look back in our history to see that how we are living in the present day isn't in fact the ideal way to live, but in fact there were times which were better than this. So that's something to look forward to next week. For today, thank you all for listening in, and look forward to seeing you all again on Meditation for All the same time next week.